Mrigashira Nakshatra, cognitive subconscious patterns, audio, visual, and kinesthetic. Some people move through life seeking knowledge, new experiences, and intellectual stimulation, always curious and never satisfied with staying in one place for too long. Mrigashira Nakshatra isn't about stability or rigid discipline. It is about exploration, questioning, and the thrill of discovering what lies beyond the familiar. Their subconscious processing is wired for inquiry and adaptability, meaning they don't just absorb information, they chase it, filter it, and refine their understanding through movement and engagement. If we break it down through NLP cognitive styles, audio, visual, and kinesthetic, we can see exactly how they perceive, process, and interact with the world around them. If their mind is visually dominant, they don't just see the world, they scan it constantly, noticing patterns, changes, and details others miss. If Mars is in the first house in Mrigashira, their eyes are always moving, absorbing information quickly, making them keen observers of body language, landscapes, and shifting dynamics in their environment. They visualize multiple possibilities at once, mapping out different scenarios before deciding on a course of action. However, if Mars is in the seventh house, their visual focus shifts outward, making them highly aware of how others move, interact, and express themselves, which can make them exceptional at reading social cues and anticipating reactions. If Mercury is in the third house in Mrigashira, their auditory processing is highly refined, making them exceptional communicators, linguists, and quick thinkers. They process information through words, dialogue, and internal conversations, thriving in debate, writing, teaching, and storytelling. They often talk through their thoughts aloud, needing discussion to fully refine their ideas. If Mercury is in the ninth house, their auditory processing expands into philosophical and abstract knowledge, meaning they absorb information best through lectures, spiritual discourses, and storytelling traditions, learning best when concepts are spoken or explained interactively. If Rahu is in the sixth house in Mrigashira, their kinesthetic processing is highly restless, experimental, and unpredictable. They learn best by doing, exploring, and physically engaging with the world around them. They don't just take in information passively. They test it, manipulate it, and apply it in unconventional ways. This makes them thrive in fields requiring movement, such as athletics, investigative work, or hands-on problem-solving professions. However, if Rahu is in the 12th house, their kinesthetic awareness becomes more abstract, leading them to explore hidden realms, altered states of consciousness, or spiritual experiences where learning is more subconscious rather than physically interactive. Mrigashira's curious and exploratory nature ensures that their cognitive processing is always dynamic and adaptable. Whether they see, hear, or feel their reality, they process life through a lens of curiosity and movement, making them natural seekers, communicators, and adventurers. Their greatest strength lies in their ability to continuously search for knowledge, ensuring that they never become stagnant and always remain engaged with the ever-changing world around them. Mrigashira Nakshatra, motivation direction, towards versus away from. Some people move toward new experiences, seeking excitement, growth, and expansion, while others are motivated by avoiding discomfort, stagnation, or restrictions. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its curiosity, adaptability, and restless search for knowledge, naturally leans towards seeking, towards, rather than escaping, away from. However, whether they are motivated by the pursuit of something, towards, or by the need to avoid a situation, away from, depends on planetary placements. Mars and Rahu in the first and seventh houses push them towards seeking, while Mercury and Saturn in the fourth and 10th houses may create motivation driven by avoidance or responsibility. If Mars is in the first house in Mrigashira, their motivation is strongly towards oriented. They are always chasing something new, whether it's knowledge, experiences, or personal challenges. They thrive when they have a goal, a target, or something stimulating to pursue, and they rarely sit still for long. Their curiosity is active, meaning they don't just think about exploring, they actually take the first step toward it. However, if Mars is in the seventh house, their motivation shifts toward relationships and external validation, meaning they pursue partners, social experiences, and intellectual connections as a way of expanding their world and keeping their minds engaged. If Rahu is in the 6th house in Mrigashira, they are obsessed with new opportunities, knowledge, and unconventional experiences, making them highly driven by what they can achieve rather than what they want to avoid. They are constantly pushing forward, experimenting with new methods, and refusing to settle into a routine. However, if Rahu is in the 12th house, their motivation becomes away from oriented, as they feel an underlying need to escape the mundane, ordinary world. They are drawn to mysticism, hidden knowledge, or even self-isolation, often moving away from material life in search of spiritual liberation or unconventional experiences. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, their motivation tends to be away from oriented, meaning they seek to avoid emotional discomfort, stagnation, or a restrictive home life. They often feel the need to move away from their roots, travel, or mentally detach from emotional burdens. Their curiosity is driven by a need to escape what feels too confining, rather than a pure desire to explore. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their motivation shifts to towards, as they actively pursue career opportunities, intellectual status, and knowledge that helps them grow professionally. If Saturn is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, their motivation is also away from oriented, as they may feel a sense of emotional heaviness or obligations tied to family, tradition, or personal responsibilities. They are motivated to move away from these pressures, seeking freedom through intellectual independence and exploration. However, if Saturn is in the 10th house, they become highly towards oriented, driven by long-term professional success, structured learning, and mastery over a specialized skill or knowledge domain. They seek authority, recognition, and stability in their career, constantly working toward higher goals. Mrigashira Nakshatra's innate curiosity and desire to explore make it naturally inclined towards motivation style. But planetary placements determine whether they chase something exciting or run from something restricting. Learning to balance their search for knowledge with the ability to stay present and grounded allows them to fully maximize their potential as seekers, communicators, and adventurers. Mrigashira Nakshatra, attention direction, self or others. Some people focus deeply on their personal thoughts, desires, and self-growth, while others are highly attuned to the world around them, responding to external stimuli, people, and social dynamics. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its restless curiosity, intellectual sharpness, and constant pursuit of knowledge, naturally oscillates between internal reflection and external exploration. However, whether they are self-focused, centered on their personal journey, or others-focused, engaged with people and their surroundings, depends on planetary placements. Moon and Rahu in the 1st and 7th houses influence self or others-oriented attention, while Mercury and Saturn in the 4th and 10th houses shape whether they are internally or externally driven. If Moon is in the 1st house in Mrigashira, their attention is highly self-focused. They are deeply engaged in their own thoughts, emotions, and intellectual pursuits, often prioritizing personal exploration, learning, and self-expression. They are highly independent thinkers who prefer to process information internally before sharing it with others. However, if Moon is in the 7th house, their attention shifts outward, making them highly people-oriented, socially adaptable, and relationship-driven. They become highly attuned to others' emotional states, communication styles, and social dynamics, sometimes prioritizing external validation over their own needs. If Rahu is in the 1st house in Mrigashira, their attention is strongly self-driven, meaning they focus on personal desires, ambitions, and their own path of exploration. They constantly seek new experiences, intellectual stimulation, and personal reinvention, sometimes at the expense of social relationships. However, if Rahu is in the 7th house, their focus becomes externally directed, making them highly intrigued by others, constantly seeking excitement and stimulation through partnerships and social interactions. They are often drawn to unique, unconventional people and may feel restless without external engagement. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, their attention remains internally focused, as they are deeply engaged in private thoughts, intellectual reflection, and mental exploration. They process information through personal contemplation, preferring quiet study, writing, or self-driven research, rather than social engagement. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their attention shifts outward. They become highly focused on public communication, career discussions, and external validation of their ideas. They are more engaged in debates, teaching, and professional networking, where their intellectual presence is acknowledged by others. If Saturn is in the 4th house in Mrigashīrā, their attention is internally structured, meaning they build mental discipline, emotional stability, and intellectual depth within themselves before engaging with the world. They are self-reliant and introspective, analyzing their personal growth rather than seeking external feedback. However, if Saturn is in the 10th house, their attention becomes externally structured, meaning they are highly career-driven, success-oriented, and focused on building their public image and authority. Their need for recognition and validation from professional or societal structures becomes a dominant motivation. Mrigashira Nakshatra's natural curiosity ensures that they engage with both internal reflection and external exploration. But planetary placements determine whether they turn inward for personal understanding or outward to engage with others. Learning to balance self-awareness with external adaptability allows them to thrive as intellectual seekers, communicators, and knowledge-driven explorers. Mrigashira Nakshatra, understanding chunk size. Some people grasp broad concepts and overarching themes, seeing patterns and making intuitive leaps, while others analyze details meticulously, breaking information down into small, precise steps. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its curiosity, adaptability, and intellectual sharpness, naturally leans towards seeking knowledge through exploration and analysis. However, whether they process information in big picture, macro, or detail-oriented micro chunks depends on planetary placements. Jupiter and Mercury in the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses influence whether they focus on broad themes or precise details. If Jupiter is in the 1st house in Mrigashīrā, their understanding is big picture oriented, meaning they prefer broad exploration, abstract thinking, and philosophical connections, rather than getting lost in small details. They thrive when discussing universal themes, long-term growth, and expansive ideas, often drawing conclusions based on intuition and experience rather than structured logic. They may sometimes overlook details, assuming they will naturally fall into place. If Jupiter moves to the 9th house, this big picture thinking expands further, making them focus on spiritual knowledge, higher learning, and cross-cultural wisdom, often contemplating universal truths rather than working through step-by-step analysis. If Mercury is in the 5th house in Mrigashīrā, their thinking is highly specific, detail-focused, and analytical. They break down complex ideas into structured, smaller components, making them excellent at strategy, problem-solving, and creative refinement. They prefer logical sequences, structured learning, and analyzing nuances, ensuring that nothing is left ambiguous. Unlike Jupiter, which generalizes, Mercury in this placement seeks exact definitions, precise communication, and technical mastery, excelling in linguistics, analytics, or structured creative endeavors. However, if Mercury moves to the 9th house, their processing expands toward bigger picture perspectives, meaning they absorb abstract philosophical ideas, but still pay attention to details when analyzing texts, scriptures, or intellectual debates. If Ketu is in the 1st house in Mrigashīrā, their understanding is paradoxically broad yet deeply instinctual. They see patterns without needing structured reasoning, often absorbing large amounts of information without consciously realizing how they learned it. They trust intuitive insights and indirect knowledge over direct analysis, making them appear mystically knowledgeable yet detached from structured learning methods. However, if Ketu is in the 5th house, their thinking becomes highly detail-oriented but nonlinear, meaning they notice hidden symbols, abstract connections, and deep subconscious patterns others might overlook. They may struggle with traditional learning structures, but excel in intuitive or symbolic reasoning. Mrigashira Nakshatra's intellectual curiosity and ability to gather knowledge from diverse sources make it adaptable to both macro and micro thinking, depending on planetary influences. When planetary placements emphasize big picture awareness, they excel in abstract thought, philosophy, and broad intellectual exploration. But when detail-oriented influences dominate, they become methodical thinkers capable of precise analysis and refined problem solving. Their challenge is to balance their natural love for exploration with the patience to master fine details, ensuring that their intellectual pursuits lead to both depth and breadth of understanding. Mrigashira Nakshatra, frame of reference, internal or external. Some people trust their own instincts, drawing conclusions based on personal experiences and internal reasoning, while others seek validation, adjusting their beliefs and decisions based on external feedback and social approval. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its curiosity, adaptability, and thirst for knowledge, naturally leans toward questioning everything and exploring multiple perspectives. However, whether they are internally referenced, self-driven, or externally referenced, seeking validation from others, depends on planetary placements. Jupiter, Moon, Mercury, and Saturn in the 4th and 10th houses shape whether they derive confidence and decision-making from within or rely on external cues. If Jupiter is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, their frame of reference is deeply internal, meaning they trust their own wisdom, instincts, and intellectual curiosity to guide them. They do not feel the need to conform to societal expectations or seek validation because they believe in their own ability to explore and discover truth. Their learning style is self-directed, meaning they prefer gathering knowledge at their own pace rather than following structured education. However, if Jupiter is in the 10th house, their reference frame shifts externally. Success becomes measured by career achievements, recognition from mentors, and the ability to influence society. They may still have strong personal convictions, but they start evaluating their progress based on how the world perceives them. If the moon is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, their sense of validation is strongly internal and emotionally driven. They process life through personal intuition, emotions, and deep subconscious experiences, making them highly self-reliant when it comes to making choices. They don't feel an intense need for social approval as long as their emotional world feels balanced. However, if the moon moves to the 10th house, their frame of reference becomes externally conditioned. They begin to seek validation through public acknowledgement, professional status, and emotional responses from others. They are more likely to feel influenced by external expectations, adjusting their choices to maintain social or career stability. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, they tend to process information internally before expressing it. They prefer quiet contemplation, self-learning, and intellectual independence, making them less reliant on external feedback. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their reference frame shifts outward, meaning they feel the need to prove their intelligence, refine their communication for public influence, and gain intellectual validation from peers or superiors. Their thought process is constantly shaped by external debates, discussions, and professional demands. If Saturn is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, their sense of self is internally structured, meaning they build their confidence through self-discipline, reflection, and intellectual mastery. They do not easily let external opinions alter their decisions, instead relying on long-term planning and personal responsibility. However, if Saturn is in the 10th house, their validation becomes externally conditioned. They measure their self-worth based on how well they conform to professional standards, career milestones, and societal roles. They may feel pressure to meet expectations and prove themselves through structured achievements rather than intellectual exploration alone. Mrigashira Nakshatra's intellectual curiosity and desire for exploration make it naturally open-minded and adaptive, but planetary placements determine whether they seek truth from within or adjust their beliefs based on external influences. Their challenge is to balance their ability to explore and question with the wisdom to know when to trust their inner voice. ensuring that they do not lose themselves in external validation or detach too much from constructive feedback. Mrigashira Nakshatra, action preference, proactive or reactive. Some people take initiative, seeking new opportunities and leading from the front, while others respond to situations as they unfold, preferring to adapt rather than force action. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its restless curiosity, adaptability, and constant search for knowledge, naturally leans toward exploration and movement rather than rigid planning. However, whether they are proactive, self-initiating, or reactive, responding to external triggers, depends on planetary placements. Mars, Mercury, and Rahu in the 3rd, 5th, and 10th houses influence whether they take control of situations or adjust based on external circumstances. If Mars is in the 3rd house in Mrigashīrā, their action preference is highly proactive. They are constantly initiating conversations, seeking out challenges, and pushing forward in competitive environments. They don't wait for opportunities. They create them, using their quick thinking and boldness to stay ahead. Their approach to action is direct, dynamic, and risk-taking, making them quick decision makers, but sometimes impulsive. However, if Mars is in the 10th house, their proactivity shifts to career and public influence, making them ambitious and driven to take leadership roles, initiate projects, and push forward in professional settings. They prefer being in control rather than waiting for external direction. If Mercury is in the 5th house in Mrigashīrā, their approach to action is more reactive and mentally adaptive. They prefer to gather information, analyze patterns, and respond accordingly, rather than forcing action immediately. Unlike Mars, which acts on instinct, Mercury in this position thrives on intellectual adaptability, making them great at problem solving and quick thinking, but sometimes hesitant in decision making. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their reactivity becomes strategic in professional and public settings. They prefer to watch career trends, respond to external influences, and carefully craft their career moves based on logical assessment rather than impulsive ambition. If Rahu is in the 3rd house in Mrigashīrā, their action preference becomes unpredictable, erratic, and highly proactive in communication, networking, and risk-taking. They are always experimenting with new ideas, exploring unconventional opportunities, and pushing boundaries in their pursuit of knowledge and success. However, if Rahu moves to the 10th house, their action preference shifts toward reactivity in career and public life. They often respond to external pressures, societal trends, and unexpected career shifts, making bold moves in reaction to opportunities rather than out of pure internal ambition. Mrigashira Nakshatra's exploratory nature ensures that their actions are always dynamic and adaptable. But planetary placements determine whether they take control of situations immediately or respond strategically to external influences. Those with proactive tendencies initiate and lead, while those with reactive tendencies master the art of adaptability and timing. Their greatest strength lies in balancing their natural curiosity with the ability to take decisive action when needed, ensuring they remain both flexible and effective in their pursuits. Mrigashira Nakshatra, operational style, options versus procedures. Some people thrive in flexible, ever-changing environments, adapting as they go, while others prefer structured, methodical execution, following a step-by-step plan. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its curiosity, adaptability, and love for exploration, naturally leans toward options-based thinking, preferring to explore multiple possibilities rather than commit to a single fixed path. However, whether they operate with an options-driven mindset, preferring flexibility, or a procedures-driven mindset, favoring structure and discipline, depends on planetary placements. Rahu and Mars in the 3rd and 6th houses encourage adaptability, while Mercury and Saturn in the 6th and 10th houses promote structured execution. If Rahu is in the 3rd house in Mrigashīrā, their operational style is highly options-based. They prefer to explore, experiment, and constantly shift between different approaches, making them innovative but sometimes inconsistent. They thrive in dynamic environments where they can engage in multiple interests, take risks, and challenge traditional ways of thinking. However, This can lead to lack of commitment and an inability to settle into a structured workflow, which can clash with practical demands for stability. If Rahu is in the sixth house, they still prefer options, but with a more problem-solving orientation, meaning they experiment with different ways to complete tasks in work and health, but still maintain a level of routine and focus. If Mars is in the third house in Mrigashira, they operate in high-energy, instinct-driven mode, excelling in fields requiring fast decision-making and adaptability. Their approach to work is aggressive, competitive, and trial-based, preferring to act quickly rather than overplan. However, this can sometimes lead to rushed execution and difficulty following through on structured tasks. If Mars is in the sixth house, their operational style becomes more disciplined and focused on endurance, integrating strategic problem-solving with long-term goal setting, ensuring that their natural curiosity doesn't lead to scattered efforts. If Mercury is in the sixth house in Mrigashira, their operational style leans heavily toward procedures. They thrive in structured work environments that require analysis, logical execution, and step-by-step processing. They excel at breaking down complex problems into manageable pieces, ensuring clarity and refinement in execution. Unlike Rahu, which jumps between ideas, Mercury in this position follows a structured learning curve, ensuring that each step builds upon the last. If Saturn is in the 10th house in Mrigashira, their work style is procedural, long-term focused, and highly disciplined. They prefer hierarchical, well-structured work environments, excelling in corporate, government, or leadership roles that require patience and commitment. They dislike sudden changes and unstructured workflows, thriving when there is a clear roadmap to follow. While this provides stability, it can sometimes suppress Mrigashira's natural exploratory instincts, making them feel trapped in rigid structures. Mrigashira Nakshatra's innate curiosity and love for discovery make it naturally inclined toward options-driven thinking, where they can explore different paths, innovate, and remain mentally engaged. However, planetary placements determine whether they embrace flexibility or commit to structured execution. The key for Mrigashira natives is to balance their adaptability with enough structure to ensure their ideas and explorations lead to concrete results, allowing them to thrive both in spontaneous creativity and methodical mastery. Mrigashira Nakshatra, views, general or specific. Some people see the bigger picture, focusing on broad themes and abstract connections, while others prefer to analyze details, breaking things down into precise structured elements. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its intellectual curiosity, adaptability, and constant quest for knowledge, naturally leans toward seeking multiple perspectives rather than fixating on rigid structures. However, whether they process information in big picture, general, or detail-oriented, specific chunks depends on planetary placements. Jupiter and Mercury in the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses influence whether they focus on overarching themes or precise details. If Jupiter is in the 1st house in Mrigashira, their thinking is broad and general, meaning they process life through patterns, expansive knowledge, and conceptual awareness, rather than meticulous details. They prefer to see the world as an interconnected web of ideas and experiences, making them excellent at theorizing, storytelling, and abstract thinking. However, they may overlook finer details in favor of the bigger picture, assuming that things will naturally fit into place. If Jupiter moves to the 9th house, this big picture thinking expands even further, drawing them toward philosophy, spiritual exploration, and cultural understanding, often making them more focused on wisdom and exploration rather than on technical precision. If Mercury is in the 5th house in Mrigashira, their thinking is highly specific, detail-focused, and analytical. They enjoy breaking down information into structured steps, excelling in language, writing, and technical expertise. Unlike Jupiter, which seeks to grasp general truths, Mercury in this position wants exact definitions, logical sequences, and structured execution, making them proficient in fine-tuned communication, strategic thinking, and problem-solving. However, if Mercury moves to the 9th house, their thinking expands into more generalized, big-picture perspectives, meaning they become less focused on the specifics of an argument and more interested in overarching knowledge and philosophical insights. If Ketu is in the first house in Mrigashīrā, their understanding is paradoxically broad yet deeply instinctual. They don't process knowledge in a structured way, but instead absorb insights intuitively, seeing connections without logical steps. They may struggle to explain their thought process in detail because their mind jumps between abstract ideas rather than following linear reasoning. However, if Ketu is in the fifth house, their thinking becomes highly detail-oriented but nonlinear, meaning they notice hidden details and symbolic patterns that others might overlook. They excel in esoteric knowledge, mysticism, or deep research, but they may struggle with traditional academic learning methods. Mrigashira Nakshatra's intellectual curiosity and love for exploration make it adaptable to both macro and micro thinking, depending on planetary influences. When planetary placements emphasize big picture awareness, they excel in abstract thought, philosophy, and broad intellectual exploration. But when detail-oriented influences dominate, they become methodical thinkers capable of precise analysis and technical mastery. Their challenge is to balance their natural love for discovery with the patience to refine details, ensuring that their intellectual pursuits lead to both depth and breadth of understanding. Mrigashira Nakshatra, work preferences, together, proximity, or solo. Some people flourish in collaborative environments, thriving on continuous interaction and teamwork. Others prefer to work independently but remain near others for stimulation and idea exchange, while some work best in complete solitude, where they can focus without distraction. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its restless curiosity, adaptability, and intellectual sharpness, naturally leans toward work that allows movement, learning, and flexibility rather than rigid structures. However, whether they function best in team settings, together, near others but independently, proximity, or in complete solitude, solo, depends on planetary placements. Venus, Mercury, and Ketu in the 3rd, 6th, and 10th houses shape their ability to collaborate, work alongside others, or prefer self-reliance. If Venus is in the 3rd house in Mrigashīrā, they prefer working together, excelling in creative, communicative, and socially engaging work environments. They enjoy roles in media, writing, marketing, fashion, and diplomacy, where they can exchange ideas and collaborate with like-minded individuals. They thrive in dynamic teams where social interaction fuels creativity and progress, but they may struggle in overly rigid or isolated work settings. If Venus is in the 10th house, they still prefer team-based environments, but with a leadership role, ensuring that their ideas and influence are recognized within the group rather than just being a passive participant. If Mercury is in the 6th house in Mrigashīrā, they work best in proximity-based settings, where they engage in discussions and collaborations, but still maintain personal intellectual independence. They enjoy jobs that involve problem-solving, writing, analytics, and research, where they can work alone, yet have access to collaborative brainstorming when needed. If Mercury moves to the 10th house, their proximity-based preference extends to leadership positions, meaning they engage in high-level discussions, strategy sessions, and negotiations, but prefer to work independently on execution. If Ketu is in the 6th house in Mrigashīrā, they work best solo, excelling in self-driven professions where they can operate on their own terms without excessive supervision or group reliance. They dislike repetitive tasks, structured corporate environments, and micromanagement, preferring roles that involve research, spirituality, esoteric knowledge, or creative writing. If Ketu is in the 10th house, their solo work preference becomes even more pronounced, leading them to careers in consulting, freelancing, or unconventional professions where they do not have to conform to rigid workplace expectations. Mrigashira Nakshatra's intellectual agility and need for exploration allow them to excel in both team-based and independent roles, but planetary placements determine whether they thrive in direct collaboration, require space while staying connected, or prefer complete autonomy. Their challenge is to balance their need for variety with the ability to commit to structured work environments, ensuring they stay engaged without feeling restricted. Mrigashira Nakshatra experience, association versus dissociation. Some people fully immerse themselves in their experiences, feeling deeply connected to emotions, relationships, and the world around them, while others step back, analyze, and detach, preferring to observe rather than fully engage. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its curiosity, adaptability, and intellectual approach to life, naturally leans towards seeking new experiences rather than being overly attached to them. However, whether they associate, fully engage, or dissociate, detach, and observe from a distance depends on planetary placements. Mercury and Jupiter in the 4th, 5th, and 10th houses influence whether they immerse themselves in experiences or keep an emotional and mental distance. If Mercury is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, their experience is highly associated, meaning they are mentally and emotionally engaged in their personal life, family, and inner world. They process events through active thoughts, conversations, and emotional connections, making them highly engaged in their immediate surroundings. They struggle with detachment and objectivity, often overanalyzing personal experiences and relationships. However, if Mercury is in the 10th house, their experience shifts toward dissociation. They become more strategic, career-focused, and detached from emotions, often prioritizing logic and professional advancement over personal attachments. This can clash with Mrigashira's natural emotional curiosity, making them feel mentally engaged but emotionally disconnected from their work and life experiences. If Jupiter is in the 5th house in Mrigashira, their experience remains highly associated, especially in areas of learning, creativity, and relationships. They immerse themselves in romantic and intellectual experiences, fully engaging in joy, passion, and exploration. They approach life with enthusiasm and emotional depth, finding fulfillment in teaching, self-expression, and creative pursuits. However, if Jupiter moves to the 10th house, their approach to experience becomes more dissociated. They focus on bigger systems, career progression, and long-term influence rather than personal emotions. They may take a more objective, structured approach to life, ensuring that decisions are made logically rather than emotionally, which can conflict with Mrigashira's need for curiosity-driven experiences. If Ketu is in the 4th house in Mrigashira, their experience of life is strongly dissociated, particularly in emotional and personal matters. They struggle with attachment to home, family, and personal comfort, often feeling emotionally disconnected from their surroundings. Mrigashira's desire for engagement and movement clashes with Ketu's detached karmic energy, making them feel like they are constantly searching for something, yet never fully belonging anywhere. If Ketu moves to the 5th house, this dissociation extends to creativity, romance, and self-expression, where they may detach from pleasure, emotional depth, or traditional ways of experiencing joy, processing events in a more spiritual or detached manner. Mrigashira Nakshatra's natural inclination is to explore and engage with experiences intellectually rather than emotionally, making placements that encourage dissociation, like Ketu or a highly career-focused Mercury or Jupiter, feel unnatural or conflicting. The challenge for Mrigashira natives with dissociative planetary placements is to balance their desire for knowledge and discovery with the ability to emotionally invest in the experiences they seek, ensuring they neither become lost in constant seeking nor disengaged from the joy of living. Mrigashira Nakshatra. Approach: matching versus mismatching. Some people align with existing structures, seeking familiarity and reinforcing patterns, while others question, challenge, and break away from norms, always searching for what's different or missing. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its restless curiosity, intellectual agility, and adaptability, naturally leans toward mismatching, always seeking new knowledge, fresh perspectives, and alternative viewpoints. However, whether they prefer matching, seeking alignment and continuity, or mismatching, focusing on differences and breaking patterns, depends on planetary placements. Saturn and Rahu in the 3rd and 6th houses influence whether they maintain tradition or seek radical transformation. If Saturn is in the 3rd house in Mrigashira, their approach is matching-oriented, meaning they prefer structured learning, established methods, and intellectual traditions. They trust proven systems and are cautious about adopting new ideas too quickly, ensuring they have a strong foundation before making changes. They are deliberate, patient, and methodical, excelling in organized communication, structured knowledge, and practical skill building. However, if Saturn is in the sixth house, their matching tendency becomes even stronger in work, discipline, and routine. They follow strict schedules, rely on established workflows, and focus on efficiency rather than constant change. While this enhances Mrigashira's analytical ability, it may also clash with their natural curiosity, making them feel restricted by too much structure. If Rahu is in the third house in Mrigashira, their approach becomes highly mismatching. They challenge intellectual norms, reject conventional learning paths, and seek unique ways of gathering information. Unlike Saturn, which follows rules, Rahu disrupts them, making these individuals highly inventive, unconventional, and constantly questioning. While this makes them brilliant in innovation and forward-thinking fields, it can also create mental restlessness and difficulty in committing to a single path. If Rahu moves to the sixth house, mismatching becomes even more pronounced in work, competition, and problem solving. They resist traditional job structures, experiment with alternative ways of working, and constantly challenge authority. This can bring success in unconventional careers, but also create instability if they struggle to commit to a clear direction. Mrigashira Nakshatra's intellectual curiosity and need for discovery make it naturally lean toward mismatching, seeking diversity, new experiences, and alternative viewpoints. However, planetary placements determine whether they embrace established structures or constantly seek change. The key for Mrigashira natives is to balance their desire for fresh insights with the wisdom to recognize when structure and stability are necessary, ensuring that their exploration leads to mastery rather than endless wandering. Mrigashira Nakshatra, time experience, in time versus through time. Some people fully engage with the present, while others process time as a structured sequence, always considering past lessons and future possibilities. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its curiosity and adaptability, naturally leans toward living in the moment, but planetary placements influence whether they stay immersed in the now, in time, or track life across past, present, and future, through time. If Saturn is in the first house in Mrigashira, they are in time, deeply present focused, and deliberate in their actions. They move cautiously, mastering each moment with patience. But this slows down Mrigashira's natural exploratory nature, making them more methodical and less impulsive. However, if Saturn is in the seventh house, their in-time focus shifts to relationships, making them fully engaged in partnerships, sometimes struggling to detach and see long-term consequences. If Jupiter is in the fourth house in Mrigashira, their time experience becomes through time, as they process life with emotional depth, ancestral awareness, and long-term vision. They are highly reflective, ensuring stability by analyzing past experiences before moving forward. However, if Jupiter is in the 10th house, their through-time awareness shifts to career and social impact, making them strategic in their professional growth, but sometimes detached from immediate personal experiences. If Rahu is in the first house in Mrigashira, their time experience is hyper-in-time, meaning they act on impulse, curiosity, and the thrill of the present moment. They chase novelty, often neglecting long-term consequences. However, if Rahu moves to the seventh house, their focus becomes externally driven, making them hyper-aware of social validation and relationship dynamics in the moment, rather than considering long-term stability. If Ketu is in the fourth house in Mrigashira, their through-time perspective is detached, feeling disconnected from the present and overly influenced by subconscious memories or karmic cycles. They may struggle to engage fully in the now, often searching for meaning in past influences. If Ketu moves to the 10th house, their through-time awareness applies to career, where they may achieve success but remain emotionally disconnected, seeing their professional journey as a duty rather than a personal ambition. Mrigashira's love for discovery and change makes them naturally inclined toward in-time thinking, But planetary placements determine whether they fully engage in the present or maintain a structured awareness of time. Balancing spontaneity with long-term planning ensures they maximize both intellectual growth and life stability. Mrigashira Nakshatra, primary interest motivation, people, activities, places, or things. Some people find motivation in relationships and social connections, while others are driven by action, exploration, or material security. Mrigashira Nakshatra, known for its restless curiosity, adaptability, and love for knowledge, naturally seeks new experiences, intellectual engagement, and variety. However, whether they are primarily motivated by people, activities, places, or things depends on planetary placements. Jupiter and the Moon influence social motivation, people. Mars drives action-oriented focus, activities. Mercury directs curiosity toward places, and Saturn and Rahu determine material or structural motivations. People-oriented motivation, Jupiter or Moon in first, seventh house. If Jupiter is in the seventh house in Mrigashira, their primary motivation comes from people, particularly through partnerships, mentorship, and intellectual exchange. They thrive in relationships where they can learn from others and be guided by wisdom, and their drive often comes from seeking meaningful social connections, relationships, and teaching opportunities. Their success is often tied to how well they can network, collaborate, and expand their knowledge through interpersonal interactions. However, if the Moon is in the first house, their motivation from people is emotionally driven. They seek personal validation, emotional support, and deep connections with those around them, making their sense of purpose deeply tied to their relationships and social engagement. Activity-oriented motivation. Mars in third, sixth house. If Mars is in the third house in Mrigashira, their primary motivation is activity. They are driven by action, learning, and intellectual stimulation. They thrive in competitive, dynamic environments where they are constantly engaged in new experiences. Whether in business, communication, or sports, they are always looking for movement, challenge, and excitement. However, if Mars moves to the sixth house, their action-based motivation becomes more structured and endurance-based, meaning they focus on perseverance, work ethic, and mastering their craft over time, rather than seeking short-term thrills. Place-oriented motivation, Mercury in fourth, 10th house. If Mercury is in the fourth house in Mrigashira, their motivation is deeply tied to places, particularly in the form of intellectual stimulation and a sense of home or belonging. They often seek new environments, travel, and exploration to keep their mind engaged and refreshed. They may be drawn to careers that involve movement, such as travel blogging, journalism, or consultancy, where they can explore different locations and cultures. If Mercury moves to the 10th house, their motivation for places expands toward professional environments, meaning they are driven by career-based travel, global networking, and intellectual engagement across different industries or locations. Thing-oriented motivation. Saturn or Rahu in 6th, 10th house. If Saturn is in the 6th house in Mrigashira, their primary motivation is things, particularly structure, mastery, and material stability. They are highly focused on building long-term success, mastering specialized skills, and creating a structured approach to their work and financial security. Unlike more emotionally or socially driven placements, they are goal-oriented and thrive in fields where persistence and structure lead to long-term rewards. If Rahu is in the 10th house, their material motivation becomes status-driven, fueled by ambition, unconventional success, and the pursuit of symbols of power. They are drawn to prestigious achievements, high-profile careers, and social influence, constantly chasing something that will cement their reputation and impact. Conclusion. Mrigashira Nakshatra's natural inclination for exploration, learning, and adaptability ensures they seek motivation through new experiences, intellectual challenges, and movement. Whether their drive is focused on people, action, places, or material success, they approach it with restless curiosity and a desire to continuously grow and evolve. Their challenge is to balance their love for discovery with the ability to commit to long-term goals, ensuring that their endless search for knowledge leads to meaningful achievements rather than constant wandering.